Member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity, although, like many others, I rise with a very, very heavy heart, given what's going on and what's happening to fellow human beings that we care about. Madam Speaker, unlike most that have spoken, many either have a direct connection with Myanmar, Burma, or are on the Human Rights Committee or are on Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm none of that, and so I'm not going to get into the details of what's going on. I think it's been quite adequately put out, certainly by the Minister who reviewed it and by my colleague, our critic. However, unlike most people, I do have the distinct honor of being someone who has met Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma, in Myanmar. And it was under the auspices of a committee put together by the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, John Baird, who had a particular interest in this area, and he put together and funded a small group of parliamentarians and I think we had senators, but parliamentarians and a couple of clerks to go over just as an outreach, as we often do, sort of parliament to parliament. But part of the focus was on public accounts, and since that's been one of my mainstays here, I was asked if I wanted to go on that, and what a great honor it was. And that happened in February 2013. So it is even more difficult when you've actually met the lady, shook her hand, looked her in the eyes, had her look at you, and talk with her and realize how special she really is. And again, that's why it's difficult but important that even though many of us hold her on a bit of a pedestal, that there's also an obligation to speak out when something is wrong. And not only what is going on in Myanmar, Burma is wrong, the response of the government is wrong. And so we find ourselves, those of us that care about the people of that country and the country and its future, and realize that she is still by far the greatest hope that they have. But regardless of what party we carry in our pocket, I think the fact that we're now looking at ethnic cleansing, some are calling it genocide, some saying we're not quite there, it's legal. I don't know. I don't know that it matters at this point, given how many people are being slaughtered and how many people's homes are being destroyed and how many people are being forced out of their own country, whether we call it ethnic cleansing or genocide. The fact is, it's another horrible situation that's happening, and that's why we're standing here tonight, because at the very least, this Parliament has to go on record as speaking out, holding our government to account to make sure that they're doing absolutely as much as possible. And to be fair, I enjoyed the minister's remarks. I thought the criticism that came from my colleague was well placed, but it in no way took away from what the minister said in terms of her remarks about how Canada views this, and I had no problem applauding her remarks at the end of her speech. Particularly when she, and I wrote it down, when she talked about the fact that we Canadians are in support of the Rohingya Muslim minorities. She also said we're going to hold her, meaning Aung San Suu Kyi, to account. But we're also going to make sure that the world knows we're holding the military to account, because we all understand exactly what's going on. And we understand the difficulty that the lady has. And my heart breaks for that situation. But I've also had the opportunity to be in the same room as Nelson Mandela. I didn't get to meet him, but I was in the same room. I can't imagine Nelson Mandela taking the politically expedient way out in any circumstance, not when it's this important. To be fair, there was a whole lot of us kind of didn't put too much pressure on that issue when the election was coming up, for the very same reasons I suspect that she's not saying what we need her to say right now. And that is, there's a broader purpose, there's a broader goal, there's the democracy and future of Burma at stake, of Myanmar. We understand that. But when you hold someone out that special, there are certain expectations. And while her title is state counselor, we all know de facto she's the president. We also know that she has very little influence, let alone control, with the military. So it's a tough spot. But we need more from the lady. And we need more from the world, and we need just a smidgen more from the Canadian government. This is the time when we go to the speeches. You know, I've also been to Rwanda. And any of us that go to Holocaust events or to Rwanda events, or if you've ever been to Rwanda, you understand or begin to understand the understandable dimensions of that kind of death and violence and hate and just inhumanity. And every time we go to those events, every one of us says, never again. And yet there's always another again. And so at the very least, I want to thank our speaker for agreeing for this emergency debate. This is Canada. As difficult as it is to speak out against an ally, Aung San Suu Kyi, the issue is so important, particularly to the Rohingya Muslim minority who want to know whether they matter or not. And we're here tonight in the Canadian Parliament to say, yes, you matter. You matter like every other human being. And when there's atrocities happening, we will stand up and we will do what we can. We're not the biggest, most powerful country in the world, but we do have some influence. And we're prepared to put some of that credibility on the line, and we're doing that tonight. The lady put out a statement on September the 5th that really shook me, where she actually used the term fake news. Like, really? But I agree with our friends. There's a statement out today put out by quite a list of really credible, important human rights organizations and individuals. And I won't read it now because I'm running out of time, but they go out of their way to pretty much say in much better, tight, concise language than I did, pretty much that same argument. That we need more, we expect more, we understand the circumstance, but this is never again territory. The last thing I want to end with, Speaker, on September 19th, Aung San Suu Kyi, instead of going to the UN, gave a political briefing in Myanmar, and she closed it this way. As I said earlier, this is a diplomatic briefing, but in some ways it is more than just a diplomatic briefing. It is a friendly appeal to all those who wish Myanmar well, a friendly appeal to help us to achieve the ends that I think you would agree are desirable, not just for this particular country, but for countries all over the world. Madam Speaker, I think we stand behind that desire on the part of Aung San Suu Kyi for her people, but it is important for us to stand and hold everyone to account when we're either on the brink or in the midst of ethnic cleansing. And so I just wanted to add my personal remarks, my personal experience, and to recommit my effort and myself to the interests of Burma, and particularly to the Rohingya Muslim minorities who are being slaughtered But somehow Canada has to do both. We have to stand with the country, we have to criticize when necessary, and we need to provide moral leadership by example on this file, because if we don't, then this Parliament and other parliaments are going to hear again, over and over, never again, never again, never again, and yet it still keeps happening. At some point, we actually, as a humanity, have to mean it.
Questions and comments?